Quickly, we need a roadmap as to meeting the stipulated mandate of this panel discussion. And at international level, the political discourse several times revolves around terror attacks and violent extremism. And as such, our objective today is the role of religious leaders and the youth in preventing and countering religious extremism. And this is something that is not only plaguing our country, Kenya, but it's been synonymous to very many nations in the world, the European countries, the Americas, New Zealand, Australia, Asia, Russia. And just to give you a few examples, we remember our theme for this particular Beyond the Rules of Procedure is thinking global but acting local. So on a global scale, we have the London Bridge attack that was on the 3rd of June 2017, Brussels bombings, which was on the 22nd of March 2016, the Barcelona attacks, which were on the 17th of August 2017. Closer home, we remember the Westgate attack. We remember the Garissa University College attack, which was very, very sad. And the most recent one, as we've just seen on our screens, the Dusit D2 complex attack. My first question goes to Mr. Bruno. So for us to understand and wrap our heads around our objective for today, I think basically that it's imperative that we take a bottom-up approach towards looking at the drivers of radicalization, regardless of whether it's on our youth or the middle-aged people or even the old age. So what do you think are the drivers of radicalization?
First, to understand the question, the way you asked it, the drivers of radicalization, mostly you have to know who are being radicalized. And in many societies, as it is where radicalization happens, it's mostly the youths who are being radicalized. So you'll then beg the question, why is it the youths that are being radicalized? Why are they prone to being radicalized? The first thing of course, that comes to mind is unemployment, that they don't have jobs, so it's easy to entice them to do things, or even those who have degrees, you hear those being radicalized. For example, ISIS is even recruiting lawyers, engineers to go and work to construct because they want to come up with a state. And you apart from unemployment, of course, you'll want to talk about things like marginalization, like what was happening in Mombasa, Mombasa C Kenya, or Mpeketoni attack, or what, for example, the Abduba Rogo was being accused of. Apart from that, of course, you'll also want to talk about things like the technology, internet. It's easy now to talk, and the the groups recruiting, they can easily entice people to join their groups. Yeah. So to me, unemployment and that people are being marginalized, and also technology being an aid, kind of drives and gives a good space for radicalization. Yeah.
Before I proceed, first of all, let me talk about what violent extremism is all about. When we say violent extremism, we always focus on religions and jihadism. But in Kenya, 2007 happened. People were killed in Rift Valley. And almost 1,000 children, women were killed just because of politically motivated acts. So the people who committed that crimes, I call them extremists in terms of politically and in terms of tribes and ethnicity. So if we say that violent extremism rotates around religion, and people use the term like, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists are Muslims. You see? Which means all terrorists are Muslims. So what about the ones who terrorized the Kenyans during 2007, 2008? Number one. Again, if you go back to Central African Republic, we have selectors, we have anti-Palaka. You see, selectors are among some of the armed factions that were fighting against the government, along with anti-Palaka. So that's because of what? Number one, because of resources. Number two, because of political leadership. And if we look thoroughly about who this group are, the leaders, they always negotiate on how to be part of the government. You see? So if we use violent extremism in terms of politics, we're going to have another phase, rather than using in terms of religion. Another thing is like radicalization now, radicalizations. My friend said it's about employment, graduates. The guy who was leading the ring that killed 147 Kenyans was a private lawyer. He was from a middle-class family. Yes. So which means his father was civil servant. So he was not even looking for an issue like pertaining to lack of education or employment. So what motivated him? Is the question we need to ask ourselves. Because number one, he's from a well-paid, a good family. Number two, he has education. Number three, he's a young man coming up, a professional lawyer. So what motivated him? The question. So to me, in that field is like this. If you come back to the historical background of Kenya, we know what happened in Northeastern during the 1982, 83, 84. Then at the same time, what happens in 1992? In 1992, there was an influx of refugees from Somalia. And people in Garissa, they had problems pertaining to education, infrastructure, food, shelter, security. So if this person looks like you, he's a Somali, you are Somali, he's a Muslim, you are Muslims, he has access to education, to security, to food, and to shelter. And he's in your country as a refugee. So why don't take that advantage? Because you have been neglected by your government.
Thank you.
So you join the refugee camps. As what? As a refugee. Now in Garissa we have 50,000 Kenyans who register as refugees. The government is ignoring them. So some of the things that we have to ask ourselves is how the government is handling the youth from Garissa, Mombasa.
I think jihad, the definition of jihad, I think, okay, the one that is most people translate it as holy war, which is not correct. And maybe this one is based on the translation, maybe from the crusade, when there was crusade, and that's where it came about. But in Islam, it should be understood as to strive and to struggle for a cause. And the term jihad as something that is used, the struggle that we see nowadays, or as a, what do you call it? Or as a way to fight others, it's something that was also introduced during that time, during the time of crusade. But generally, the word that is used to maybe to mean war, it's qital, and even you can find the same verses. But still, if we use the term jihad as a way of fighting, it's something that is there in Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has there are verses about jihad, and there are also teachings about jihad. But what's the reason of jihad? That's where we are supposed to draw this line. And one of the reasons is to fight oppression. And also, the reason of jihad is also the animosity or enmity. And but the ones which are used nowadays or currently by the radicalized people and whatever, they use it as a way to separate faith. They say, since you are a Muslim, and the term that is used, hawa ni makafiri, fanya nini? So there's no teaching in Quran that tells us to kill non-Muslims.
At 70% of the people who get radicalized among the youth come from very broken families. And you see, the easiest thing of getting or capturing a person who came from a broken family is by filling that social gap which the person might have lacked in the early stages of childhood development. And you see, we live in a generation which has very many broken families, which makes the youth to become broken. And therefore, radicals come and they often give the youth money, because there's also the problem of unemployment. And once the youth are given money, then what happens is that they tend to get drawn. And it's not just because of the money. They receive a sense of identity once they're there. Because I was looking at a TED Talk of a former guy who used to be, at lack of a better words, a violent extremist. And this guy, he joined ISIS. And you see, the reason as to why he joined IS was because he lacked a father when he was very young. So what happened is that he grew up, got a bunch of his friends, who, of course, directed him to an extremist, who told him and who gave him a sense of identity, and it told him that he was a defender of the faith, a defender of his faith. Before the guy knew it, when he was 17, he went to Canada, and he recruited 50 other members. At such a young age, at 17, he recruited 50 other members into IS. Cut the long story short, of course, he became a reformed person. But the essence of relationship is very important. When we create self-help groups for the youth, then this can be an important measure of fighting extremism among the youth.
Into extremist ideas, and I think at this point it's important that we note that extremist groups are not only the Al-Shabaabs that we know of, yeah, and the Al-Qaeda and the ISIS, yeah. We also have white supremacists. We also have neo-Nazis. We also have all that you can think about. It's not only limited towards the Islamic terror groups and extremist groups, yeah.
We have Gaza in Kenya.
Yeah, exactly. Gaza could also be considered as one. So, Ms. Sylvia, with this in mind, what, in your opinion, are some of the mitigation measures towards salvaging the already radicalized youth? Of course, apart from what is just said.
I think that if talking about it, dialogue is important. If the religious leaders continue to, because I have seen that they have started talking about radicalization, and also for them to talk to the youth and make it in an open way, in the sense that they are free to come to their religious leaders and tell them, maybe I have been radicalized, or someone is trying to get me to be a radical person, and be open about it. So I think dialogue is the most important. Also dialogue between different religious sectors, because the misconception is that this terrorists are Muslim. But you will find that there are people who have been converted, and they have been taught that jihad is this way, the wrong kind of way. But I think dialogue is the most important, in my opinion.
What, in your opinion, is the role of religious leaders across the board, ranging from Islam to Christianity to Hindu, across the board, in preempting violent extremism? Yeah.
I've been a Christian, and I'm a Muslim. So, and the teachings that we have, if we have the correct understanding of the religion and the knowledge that you are being taught, so this will help us to be able to live with other faiths together. Currently, we do have, as a country, we have an interreligious council where all the faiths sit together, and we discuss, and we do a lot of things there. And also, it is upon the religious leaders to ensure that they themselves, they ensure that they are able to interact with other faiths. And the other thing is that also to teach their congregants that you're supposed to, what the teachings tells us. Because we do have clear teachings that tell us that how we are supposed to interact with other people. We have that even in Islam, and they are very clear. Maybe because of time, I could not just give the example, but we do have that. And I think one thing that is important here, it is that our religion is the main objective of the religion. Is it a competition, or to be aggressive against one another and such? So if we understand what's the concept of religion, this is also going to assist us to understand other faiths and to live together in harmony.
let me take as to a country called New Zealand. New Zealand, they have lost 50 Muslims on March, 50 Muslims on March this year. And the leader herself, the prime minister, condemned it and called it terrorist act. And the person who committed that act was a white supremacist. But the US president refused to call it what? Terrorist. He said a mentally ill person. Australia the same. You see, so the British prime minister the same. So if a Muslim person, a youth, commits or kills a non-Muslim, is a terrorist. But when they are being killed, it's not a terrorist act. So the first thing we have to know is this. As a youth in Kenya, as a youth in Africa, how can we correct our leaders when they intend to divide us? You see, because let's go to Somalia. Somalis, they are Muslims, 100%. They are Somalis, same language, same ethnicity, and still they are not spared in the attack of who? Of Al-Shabaab. But once Al-Shabaab comes to Kenya, they target who? The Christians. So what's the intention now? That is to divide the Kenyans on religious and ethnicity ground. So if we fall to that trap, then we are doomed. So as a youth now, what can we do? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. How can we come against any form of division? Because we are divided when it comes to Raila and Uhuru. The same when it comes to what? Al-Shabaab and Kenya. The same again when it comes to what? Jubilee or whatever. So what can we do as a youth? How can we focus the interest and the prosperity of Kenya? Don't see me as Muhammad. I don't see you as Njoroge. See me as a Kenyan. I see you as a Kenyan. And we go forward. We work in 3 areas. Number 1, the community. Number 2, the university students. And number 3, the youth who are not in school. So the university students, like now what we're doing here, is like a panel. So I never met with Mr. Israel. You see, so I never thought we have such a person who is not a Muslim, but also understands very well what violent extremism is. You see, I never met with my friend there, but we met today. And I know that I have Kenyans who can come out and speak on this issue. Number 1. Number 2, again, is we have religious leaders, community leaders. Like now, April 26, our board member was with us in Italy. We invited Somali leaders, use 3 languages, which is Somali, Swahili, and English, on how we can tackle this issue of violent extremism as a community. You see, because it is affecting the whole of us, not only Kenya, the whole of us. Again, we do what we call street campaigns. You know, it's very hard to come out to the streets and they'll condemn all form of violent extremism, especially focused on terrorism. It's very hard because you'll be targeted. In fact, I have been warned, threatened, intimidated, and targeted sometimes back. So what we do is we put a tent in Italy, in the streets, next to Garissa Lodge, where we have many people, Somalis, and we call people to come out against any form of violent extremism, to come against terrorism.
So soon it will be like something normal. What are we doing to appreciate that kind of diversity? I think the same steps we are doing to appreciate such kind of diversity is the same kind of steps we can also take to appreciate religious diversity. And because religion is also being used to, you know, why many jihadists, as he is saying, or many terrorists clinch towards religion is to just be legitimate, to legitimize their action. So if religion is being used to legitimize these actions, I think, and to spread this radicalism, I think the same religious leaders can also use religion to stop it by, of course, teaching the right kind of teachings.
I think one thing that every youth needs to do is to understand really where the whole aspect and the whole issue of terrorism began. because I believe that once people understand the history of religious extremism, let me not use the word terrorism, but the history of religious extremism, then we are able to find where the whole problem came. Just like you, before I was woke, let me say that, I used to hate Muslims to a certain extent. I'm a Christian, and I still am. Because every time I thought of a Muslim, the whole idea of terrorism came to my mind. And this is what some of us, even here in this place, have suffered, by the way. It's just that maybe most of you have now become woke and you now know better. But I had to read about it, and nowadays I still believe, or rather I believe, that terrorism, or rather religious extremism, is as a result of economically drawn interest. Because look at the history of the Crusaders which happened in the 15th century, like so many years ago, 500 years ago. You see, the history of the Crusaders, what happened is that Europe had a lot of economic interests towards the Arab world, and the Islamic world was growing, and it was growing in such a rapid, the speed of its growth was so rapid. So what happened is that Europe needed something, a unifying factor, so that it could combine the whole armies of Europe to go and fight the Muslim-dominated world, which was growing because they had politically driven interest. So what did they use? They used Christianity. Now what happens with Islam? You see, Islam, honestly, I've read Islam, and we can find the 5 pillars of Islam. There are things like the Shahada, the Zakat. Zakat is all about alms giving. Now, if you talk to me about things like Zakat, to me, it just means that you love one another because all you're doing is giving. But you see, the problem is when we pollute the doctrine to fit in your own interests. And now this pollution of doctrine leads to a whole problem of creating a generation which is very extreme and which leads to many deaths. So the thing is, my final word, just my final sentence, you see, terrorism is all driven by economic interest. Terrorism is the force, is the power, but then religion is the flag behind it. When you see a flag, you see an identity of someone. But then you need to think beyond the flag. You need to look at the power. Now that is going to help young people to solve this whole issue.
Simply, I can just say we are doing a lot. We've been involved in so many forums on the same, but on our part as a CIPK, or Council of Imams and Preachers, mostly we educate the imams themselves, because every imam they do have followers. So maybe in a masjid you can find over 500 people. So once you educate these people and you give them forums, it means that they are going to preach to these people, and so that they may get the proper understanding. In May, we also had, as a CAPK, we worked with the NCIC, and we had a forum where we trained imams. We had close to 100 of them from within Nairobi County, and at least they got such rating, and it's not just the beginning. And we still have others, because we also have the other aspect of radicalization. We are thinking of the youth, but mostly our focus is directed to men, but we forget the ladies. But there are also there's a point where it comes that they are also perpetrators, they are victims, and so many happen with them. There are also there are cases where they have been used as jihadi brides. So we do have all these things, and this is what we are working on currently. And maybe in the month of September, we'll have a forum with female ustadas or female teachers that will be training them, so that they may also assist our sisters in the same.
I hope you've enjoyed the show. But my take for you is this. As you've heard in the discussion, there's little that is being done about this. So what will you as a viewer do? Will you sit back and do nothing? Or are you going to act upon it? Spread the word.